I love pirate history and pirate lore.
Yeah.
Not just pirate lore. I mean, I love Sea of Thieves and Pirates of the Caribbean and the fantasy elements as well. And I love the historical kind of documentation of these trials and acquisitions and everything else that occurred during the time. But somewhere between those two is where our kind of collective history and memory about the Golden Age of Piracy exists.
Yeah.
Because so much of what we quote unquote know comes from not necessarily the most reliable sources.
Sure.
And so
these are pirates we're talking about.
Well, but see, this is the beauty of it. It's not just that there were pirates who had their kind of version of history. The ones that were capturing them and trying them also had their version of history.
Yeah, sure.
There was very much a tension between these kind of two narratives that we end up with this kind of blending of the two, and then we kind of sprinkle in a lot of fantastic elements as well.
Interesting, yeah.
I say that to say that as part of what you've heard from me before, and this is true of half-bowl histories in general, it's a fun look back at history. This is not going to get you an A on your, history exam, right?
Right.
You'll get maybe a C+. That's what we're shooting for. Really the middle, but the high middle. That's what I'm so excited because we got such great feedback on our Calico Jack episode, and this one very much is like a sequel to that episode.
Yeah.
Because today we're going to be talking about Mary Read. Mary Read, one of two of the most famous pirates, and of course the most famous female pirates of the era, both of which sailed with Calico Jack. Now, when we did our Calico Jack story, in fact, I would actually even recommend, if you've not listened to that episode, listen to that one first.
And then come back to this one. Yeah.
Because there's elements of that story that I'm not going to get to here that are relevant to her because they did sail together and all that kind of good stuff. And I even left that episode saying, you know what? We need to do an Ambani episode. But in preparation, in preparation for that one, I started really kind of looking more into Mary Read, who honestly gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah. And
she's a BA person of history. And I was like, you know what? We kind of touched on Ambani. We did an Ambani story, and that's great. We're going to talk about Mary Read.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited. So as I mentioned, man, you got to be mindful of the sources as we're kind of thinking about, these different accounts of who these people were.
Yeah.
I'm one of the books that I'm pulling from heavily for her background is Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates. This is essentially the sacred tome of pirate quote unquote history.
I love that that's a real book like that.
Oh, yeah.
That's an authoritative book like that. That's fantastic.
Well, and authoritative in again, the quote unquote sense, right?
In the way that you can be,
right?
If that's even.
Well, because you have
you can even claim that.
Yeah, and you have different historical records, for example, trials. And a lot of this has to do with there's a narrative that Charles Johnson, this is the earliest kind of like narrative that's out there in terms of taking these legendary figures from history and kind of telling their story and collecting their story. And, there is even a question of who was Charles Johnson. We don't really fully know who the self-proclaimed Captain Charles Johnson really even is. And yet he's the one that kind of collected these stories through which so much has kind of sprouted out of and everything else. And some of it's been disproven and some of it's been highly questioned and everything else. And so I want to make that, that statement.
Yeah, no, that's good.
All right, let's talk about Mary, man. To talk about Mary Read, who was born in England, late 1600s, early 1700s. Her story really begins not with her, but with her mom. Okay? So, all right, so Mary Read's mom, she marries this very kind of young, well-off dude, his family's well-off. Things are great. He's like, hey, I want to be a sailor. She's like, cool. They get pregnant. He's like, I still want to be a sailor. Deuces.
Wow.
Leaves. She has a son. Her husband never returns. Okay? Mm-hmm. While he's gone, a lady has needs. She ends up becoming pregnant again.
Oh.
This is kind of a terrifying situation. Again, this is late 1600s, early 1700s. The family that she married into was kind of a well-to-do family. There are certain expectations about, not getting pregnant while your husband's away in this whole situation.
Oh, that old thing.
So she leaves. She flees her family. They don't know about this. She's trying to kind of keep this a secret, right? As was also very much the time. If somebody kind of found themselves pregnant and didn't want in high society and did not want people to know about it.
Oh, well, let's go hide out for 10 months.
Yes, I'm taking a 9-month vacation to France. Like this is what they would do.
Right.
So she leaves. She goes and has the child. During the process, her son tragically dies. It was only like not even a year old. And I mean, as many parents, it's one of the greatest fears is kind of that early year where you're just trying to get everything together.
Yeah.
She's traveling with this infant. The infant dies. She has this second child who is now a daughter. So with the situation she has found herself in, she's like, okay, I am now a widow because I don't know where my husband is. I've been abandoned. I'm dealing with the loss of my son. I've just had this new baby.
That's so tragic.
I don't know what to do. So,
yeah, seriously.
So she has no financial prospects or anything like that. Again, late 1600s, early 1700s, widow with a child, all this other stuff. So she decides what she's going to do is she is going to return home to her husband's family, her late husband's family, quote unquote late. Who knows where he went?
Right.
And say basically she's going to pass off her daughter as a son. Like, this is the same boy that I left. Like, this is the same child that I left with.
Oh, wow.
Right. So thus, quote unquote, Mark Reed is born. Right.
Wow.
Now we're using the name Mark here. We don't actually know what Mary went by when she was kind of, living through society, as, like disguised as a
male.
Yeah.
Right.
And so.
Wow, that's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So, for the beginning, and she was worried. I mean, like, I've got to bring this baby, who, by the way, doesn't look like my ex-husband,
right,
to his family to sell them, not just on this fact that this little girl is actually, or this little boy is actually a little girl, but also that it's the same child that I left with. But of course, we know how much babies change over that first year. Like they look completely different.
Oh yeah, man, it's incredible.
So they go back. Her mother-in-law sees the child, embraces the child, and embraces them, and begins sending them money and kind of caring for them.
Wow.
And again, under the ruse, under the assumption that this is the same child. So this is a ruse that has to be kept up, because if not, they are going to financially,
it's ruined.
They got nothing. They got literally nothing. So early on, Mary kind of spends her early years kind of, just being a child. And as she gets older, her mother has to kind of bring her into this whole, okay, here's the situation.
Oh man! I mean, we laugh, but it's really sad. This is incredible.
This is the thing about Mary Reed, man, and her story and her mother's story, but her mother's story and then her story. Think the unique life experience of being a woman in the late 1600s, early 1700s Western civilization.
Yeah, sure.
And the challenges that come with that, right? And we have this woman who, from the day she was born, was able to live life without those same challenges. She was able to experience life as a man in that context. You see what I'm saying?
Because of the ruse.
Because of the ruse. So society treated her like she was a man, not like she was a woman.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I do.
So it's, and even the very fact that her mom found herself in this crazy situation speaks to kind of the injustices of the era.
Right.
Which still, we still are not doing the job we should, honestly, with single moms. So there's a point that can be made there.
Right.
But regardless, so we think about that specifically in this context. I just think it's fascinating.
It is very fascinating.
So she spends the first 13 years of her life in London and experiencing that kind of, what life is like as a boy. And it's an interesting thing because she finds herself now a teenager, and she's pulled in different directions, right? On the one hand, her mom has this high pressure of you've got to keep up the ruse because we've got nothing if the ruse is gone.
Right.
On the other hand, she's now a teenage young woman. Mm-hmm. Teenage young women
start to blossom and look different. And
they blossom, they look different. They also start looking at the boys a little bit different.
No, that's right.
And so so she's got this whole, she's got this kind of tendency of well, I kind of want to be seen as a lady, because I want these boys to kind of start looking at me as a lady.
Well, yeah.
But then there's the other aspect of, I've also experienced my entire life with the kind of privileges that come with being a boy in the late 1600s, early 1700s London.
Golly.
And I have to trade that in order to kind of pursue my passions and pursue what I want. And so this is she's a fascinating character.
Yeah, no kidding. It's amazing.
So she, as you can imagine, she's got a lot of built up tension from all this. So what does she do? She goes and joins the military. So she gets a little Mulan here, right? She goes and, still disguised as a man, joins the armed forces. She's very good. She actually gets promoted from foot soldier to cavalry. And during that time, things are going well. She becomes a very skilled fighter, and, she's able to maintain the ruse until Oh, yeah.
She falls in love.
You know how it goes, John David. There's always that moment. And here he is, Fleming. Oh, yeah. Fleming comes waltzing in, and he's got like all the things that ladies like. And she's like, oh, can't keep up the ruse around Fleming.
Yep.
You know, and so she finds a way for Fleming to kind of discover the fact that, you know, because they're friends, they kind of get to know each other. And she's like, you know, like she's kind of dealing with that whole tension that's there.
Yeah.
And so she kind of finds a way for Fleming to discover that she's not a man.
Right.
And in the process, as this kind of realization comes in, Fleming is now dealing with his own life confusion of like, well, this was my friend. We're buddy-buddy. And oh my gosh, she's a girl. And like, well, hang on now. She's a girl in my unit. Nobody else knows that she's here.
Right.
I could have myself a little side mistress going on right now.
Right.
And like nobody else gets that in the military. This is like, you know, early 1700s.
It's
like
really interesting.
This might be a sweet deal. So he goes over to Mary. He's like, hey, Mary, so thanks for letting me in on the fact that, you know, we got this whole, you know, you being a girl thing.
Right.
Cool that you're down with me. I'm down with you. What do you say that like we just kind of keep this thing on the DL and like, you know, have fun in our cot from time to time?
Right. Oh, man.
This is an interesting thing about Mary Read. Her virtue is notorious. Mary Read doesn't want to be nobody's mistress.
Yeah.
She wants a ring on it.
Good for her.
So she's like, no. Fleming, calm down. Like, yes, I see all of this. I want all of this. I haven't been able to be able to be the woman that I want to be.
Right.
Like my entire life. And I really want to be that woman with you, but I want to be your woman. I want you to be my man. I want to be married. And Fleming is like, okay. So they end up getting married. Now, as you can imagine, two soldiers getting married to each other becomes a bit of a newsworthy item.
We're talking early 1700s England.
Early 1700s.
It's amazing.
Now, and again, this is, I mean, very Mulan here. Like the rest of the unit, like obviously at this point, you know, the secret is out. Mary is in fact a woman. She's been a woman this entire time. It becomes kind of, rather than kind of being ostracized, her fellow unit, who, like the soldiers that she fought and bled with, embrace her and embrace the kind of the novelty of this situation. Fleming and Mary retire from the military and they start up a restaurant. And for the first time,
did they really?
They start up a restaurant. It was called the Three Horseshoe.
This all sounds like something that like could have happened last week.
Isn't
you know what
crazy?
I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, and she's not even a pirate yet. You know, this is all part of
we
her
haven't even gotten to the
story.
piracy stuff.
So she, so they start up a restaurant called the Three Horseshoe Pub or Tavern or what have you, and it does quite well in their area because they are so embraced by their fellow, you know, former soldiers and everything. Like it's like the local haunt. You know, like how every single town has like that one like Waffle House or like dive bar where like all the cops go.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
that's
like
where they hang out.
Exactly. So that's kind of what it is. For all the soldiers, like they all come here and they, you know, they just love hanging out with them. And it's just, again, it's the novelty of the situation. And again, for Mary, this is the first time in her entire life she's been able to live as herself, as a woman in public. And, you know, on top of that, she also has like all of these like soldiers around her who have embraced like her ability and what she can do.
The
and
fact that
else.
she's incredible at you know, being a soldier and is female.
Exactly. And so this is a high point, obviously, in Mary's life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as with all these stories, the high point doesn't last.
Yeah.
So her husband dies. And around that same time, the worst thing that could happen to a war profiteer or somebody who owns a restaurant that, you know, feeds soldiers, not a war profiteer, but, you know, somebody who's literally like making money off of the war, peace occurs. And so the soldiers are all kind of moved out. She no longer has the income that the restaurant was getting. She no longer has her husband. And so she's like, okay, well, I can go do what my mom did now, which was like be this kind of this widow with no prospects, you know, that's kind of out here. And admittedly, you know, I'm a young lady. I'm still in my prime and everything. I could probably make something work. But I've also experienced this life, what it's like when people think you're a dude. I'm going to go back to that.
So she actually kind of reconverted.
And again,
so that
I think it's important to not. I think in the modern era, we can kind of look at Mary Read's story through a certain sociological context that's not correct for the history.
No, I agree with that.
And so like
we don't want to impose that on Mary's
and
story.
I can understand why people would do that, but you have to really look at this from the standpoint of a woman dealing with the injustices of her time,
right?
And having such a unique life experience and a different way about kind of cutting through that she should have never had to do.
So because she had all these things going right, but then her family was torn apart by her husband's death, and then the war ended. So the prospects of her having any kind of advancement in the role that she was becoming used to had kind of gone away.
Well, she could get remarried, but at the same time, like,
who knows?
She's a good soldier. Like, she's got better deals for her rather than going to find another husband and kind of rolling the dice or trying to make her own way.
And so she actually, and so this kind of led her to going back down that, resuming your, male clothing and, doubling down on military service and all that kind of stuff. It's so interesting.
So that's the thing. You got to think about from her standpoint. What do I know how to do? Well, I can cook,
right.
Or I can hire a cook. We don't know who made the food, but regardless, I know how to run a restaurant.
Right.
But you know what I'm really good at? I'm really good at fighting. Like, I'm a really dang good soldier.
Right.
So I'm going to travel up to Holland, like you do, and I'm going to join the armed forces up in Holland.
Wow.
Where some fighting is still going on.
Okay.
She gets up there. She again resumes kind of the Mark persona. And unfortunately, as soon as she joins the military, once again, peace keeps on following her around and messing her up because she's able to advance in the midst of conflict because nobody's paying attention to what's going on. But in peace, she's expected to be something else.
Wow.
And so what she does is then she's like, okay, well, all right, no war. That's cool. Let me get into the whole shipping industry. So then she joins up with the ship. They are off at sea when, of course, they are taken upon by pirates. Now, this is a Holland ship,
Dutch,
a Hollandaise,
Hollandaise, like the Eggs Benedict
ship. Dutch. It's a Dutch ship.
And there goes all our Dutch listeners.
It's a Dutch ship, and they're taken on by English pirates. Now, Mary is the only English member of her crew. So the pirates are coming on we're going to take all your stuff, and they're like, we're Dutch. We don't have anything. I don't know anything about the Dutch. My wife is Dutch. Anyway, so forget. And so, so they go on. They take this like, hey, you, the girlish looking boy over here. You. Did I just hear an English accent? She's like, oh, governor, yes, you did. My name is Mark, and I don't know anything about these Dutch pilgrims or whatever they are. Which is, I'm guessing how
that's exactly how Mary Read sounded.
Yeah, exactly. So they go. So she ends up, joining up with these pirates, because it's a better deal than staying with, the Dutch who are now floating on fumes essentially in the middle of the ocean. And she turns pirate. And during that time, she's fairly decent. There's not any major prizes though that are necessarily, listed in terms of her early stage piracy. From that standpoint, because this was also around the time that Woodes Rogers started offering up the pardon. Now, this is why I wanted people to listen.
We've talked about that before.
It's why I wanted people to listen to that Calico Jack episode first, because that's such a crucial component to where she falls in the storyline here. She joins up, much like she joined up with the armed forces in Holland, and then peace, and all right, I'll be a pirate, and then all of a sudden here's the pardon. So she's right on. She's just trying to find some place to get some kind of stability. You know. So the pardon comes out. The crew that she's with were like, okay, we're all going to take a pardon. She ends up taking the pardon with them. They all go and, they kind of turn in. They sign articles, that sort of thing. Everybody's chilling. Fine. She's kind of living now life as kind of, off the streets, but hey, she can handle herself. She's kind of, again, being kind of seen as a male. Interesting thing about our boy Woodes Rogers. Now, Woodes Rogers, again, had this crazy idea that he was going to offer just a free pardon to all these pirates, and they'll just take it and they'll stop being pirates. And it worked. And it was crazy, but it worked. Woodes Rogers also had this other situation on his hands. You know our friends in Spain, right?
Right.
Well, back then, the English and the Spanish folk, they weren't
pals.
They weren't pals. And Woodes Rogers was really needing some assistance in combating the Spanish at the time. He's like,
did he need some pirates?
Well, he's got this entire bloodthirsty group of people that he just pardoned.
Right.
What if I ask and see if they want to become privateers, which is like pirating, but you got to pay tax, and see if they'll do that.
You're basically a mercenary.
Yeah, basically a mercenary.
Yeah.
And so all of these different pirate crews that just took the pardon, they're like, this looks a lot like pirating. Is this a trap?
You sure we're not going to get in trouble?
Woods? Is this a trap? Okay, we're going to sign it. So they do.
And they did.
And Mary was amongst these pirates that signed up and became privateers. Now, here's the thing about pirates who used to be pirates that become privateers, where basically they're pirates, but now they have to pay tax.
Right.
They don't want to do that, John David. So you now have a pirate ship, but they're under the command of a captain who is willing to pay tax, who's now surrounded by all of these people that are like, and I mean, I'm using tax. It wasn't like an official tax, but I mean, essentially you had
to just live under the law.
Exactly.
Like where, you give the king Caesar's and then you do the rest.
It's like,
and they're like, no, I don't want to do that.
We didn't have to do that before. Like what? Why don't we just keep it all? So they mutiny, they overthrow the captain, and now she's found
legit
herself,
pirates.
Yep, right back on the pirating kick. During this time, she does crew up with Jack Rackham and Anne Bonny. Now, as mentioned, it's maybe curious that she found the concept of an openly female pirate interesting. We don't know that this is the case, but you have to imagine that had to catch her attention.
Sure, yeah,
because she enjoys being seen as a woman. Like we've seen that before. Like she enjoys she enjoyed that
femininity. Yeah.
So she now sees, she's hearing all these stories about Anne Bonny and Jack Rackham. She joins up with their crew. Things are going well. But then Anne Bonny, so we talked about the virtue of Mary Read. Anne Bonny was like the other side of that coin, right? Like if there's a spectrum where like Mary Read is surrounded by all these dudes and like keeping them at bay constantly,
right?
Anne Bonny's a little bit more like you, then you, then you. Anne Bonny was kind of working her way, you know what I mean? And more power to her, but just a little bit different. So Anne Bonny sees this young, fresh-faced, smooth, silky skin young man coming on board like.
No.
Never seen a man like this before.
Wow.
So Anne Bonny, she gets her red hair done and everything else. She makes sure Jack is looking the other way and everything. She's like, hey, Mark, why don't you come over here and show me what you got? And Mark was like, okay, Anne, let me do that real quick. Let me show you what I've got. And it was revealed, of course, that in fact she was a woman.
It was wow.
So this was like a whole thing. Jack Rackham famously not happy about this situation, and so he gets let into the truth that in fact Mark is actually Mary's a girl, so he doesn't have to be threatened, at least by Mark. Now, granted, Jack probably needed to be threatened by a lot of different situations that Anne had going on, but he didn't have to be threatened by Mark. Now, I want to pause here for a moment because this
used to be a movie.
This is where fantasy and fiction tend to play in heavily. I mean, arguably throughout this entire story, that's the case. But there are several reports that will tell you that Anne and Mary and Jack were a kind of in like a poly. What's the word when you have multiple people in like a relationship?
Well, just.
Anyway,
polygamy.
Polygamy, like a polygamist. That's the
right.
We're in some kind of polygamous relationship together.
Yeah.
That's probably not true, and I think that kind of comes from that heated fan fiction type situation.
Sure,
where like people are trying to he's on a pirate, he's got two ladies at the same time. No. Listen, the virtue and the modesty of Mary Read was literally legendary. And it comes into play with her experience on Rackham's crew. What they would do is they would go around, they would obviously take prizes, but they wouldn't just take prizes. And by prizes, I mean other ships. They would also recruit from those ships. Like, hey, you want to be a pirate? Good. We need some more people. 30 guys just died last week. We need 30
right.
So, like they're constantly replenishing the ship. But occasionally, they wouldn't just ask. Sometimes they would have to take you.
Yeah.
Not because they needed the extra muscle, but because some individuals had certain skills that were very, very rare to come by.
That they really needed.
Yeah, like the average sailor, you don't want to be a pirate? Cool. We don't want to have to worry about you one way or the other. Like, that's cool. We don't care. You're a cook.
Right.
Are you a good cook?
Right.
We need one of them. You play instruments. Right. Oh man, we could listen to music. Like, you're our new radio.
Yeah, we're taking you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're a painter. Oh, that's kind of cool. Like, we could look at something other than what, like, literally the artists.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, the artisans they would take on their ship from time to time, but they would generally get pressed into it as opposed to have an option. And so such was the case for a young unnamed man that came onto the ship. All we know of him from record is that he was someone in this category of like a kind of a skilled artist, perhaps a musician, who comes on board and somebody that Mary takes a liking to. She once again, she's done this trick a couple of times. She kind of makes it slip that, she allows it so that he discovers on his own that she is not a man,
right?
That she's a woman,
right?
These two have a very, very strong relationship. Being a young, warm-blooded man and something of a musician is trying to woo her at this time as well, trying to do so under the radar, because while Jack and Anne know that she's a woman, the rest of the crew doesn't know that she's a woman.
Wow.
And, according to, her accounts, she continues to resist this man's advancements despite the fact that she does love him, because she ain't married to him.
Right.
And Mary wants to get married. That's why they called her Mary. No, I'm just kidding. Mary wants you to marry Mary Read. Point is that she keeps on resisting his advancements until this guy gets in a bit of a kerfuffle with an individual from their crew.
Okay.
The situation is he's like squabbing the deck, and then all of a sudden, you over there squabbing the deck. I don't like the way you're squabbing the deck. He's like, I'm sorry, man. I was just squabbing it the way I only know how. He's like, it's not the right way. I'm gonna kill you. At 1 o'clock, we're gonna go off the side of the ship, and I'm gonna kill you dead. It's like, what? Like, no, I can't do that. It's like, I see the pirate articles read it. If we got a bit of a fight, we go off the ship. One of us shoots each other.
Australian pirate.
Well, I didn't say where he was from. It doesn't matter. Anyway, he's going to take him out and shoot him. So this is troubling to Mary because she likes this guy, and he's not a fighter. He's a lover, not a fighter, right?
Yeah.
On contrary, who is a fighter? Mary Read.
Right.
Multiple tours of duty, Mary Read here. So Mary goes and finds this guy. She's like, hey, buddy. Is it what you want, Mark? And she's like, I don't like your face. Come outside the back. And he's like, fine. I've got a fight at 1 o'clock, but I'm gonna fight you at noon just so I can kill both of you. And she's like, sweet. That's exactly what I wanted. They go off the side. Mary kills this dude.
Right.
To make sure that he's not alive to kill the guy that she likes.
Yeah, sure.
He's so overtaken by this passion that she would do this for him, and the two give in to their passion and become lovers at this point. Now we're coming to the end here. Mary, with the rest of Jack Rackham's crew, they were taken by the authorities. Notably and historically, they were all chilling out smoking pipes at the time. So Mary Read, pipe smoker. Getting that in there.
Tangentially, right?
But they were...
Check.
They were all chilling out, smoking pipes and drinking grog and punch, and they were taken upon. Famously, many of Jack Rackham's crew kind of gave in, but Mary and Anne were still fighting, to the very tail end of the fight, before they were overtaken, and so we're constantly calling for the men to fight like men as the women were doing the fighting. They were taken in. She was pregnant at the time. Now, this kind of it comes full circle, again, to the injustices that women were experiencing at the time. And not to say that they're not still experiencing that, but it was different from the time.
Sure.
While others were being tried for piracy, she was being tried for piracy and fornication. Why? Because unlike Anne, who was married to Jack, she was unmarried and pregnant with this young man's child.
Wow. Yeah.
So she was being tried for fornication as an unmarried woman, right? Along with piracy, what? Theft and murder, and
what?
Being pregnant. So exactly. So here's the thing. So she explains the situation to the court, and she tells the story of how she killed for this young man, and in her mind, it was as holy a union, as if to say that you are willing to lay down your life or lay even someone else's life down to preserve the relationship. She saw that as holy a union had a priest been present to cast the words, right? So in her mind, the marriage did take place, and this is what she argued in court, which she never should have had to, but that's what she did. Regardless, though, being pregnant, she didn't. It was a stay of execution. They were saying that, in fact, she might have been able to make an argument for, why, because of her terms, her years of service and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
She claimed, hey, I didn't want to be a pirate anyway. And they kept on pointing out, you're one of only 2 people who resisted arrest here. So, I don't know if that's true or not. But she unfortunately did die in prison 1720. Before she was able to get either a second trial or to be put to death. So she ended up dying. So Mary Read, man, she was an interesting character, a fascinating individual.
This
with
really needs
massive
to
story.
Her story needs to be a movie. I mean, this is just such the twists and turns, and then also just incredible hardship and ingenuity on her side. It's like, man, if life hands you lemons, let's make lemonade, and she that's what she did.
And it started with her mom, and it just really set her
from
on
her
this
birth, from her very birth,
this very unique path.